Hey everybody, welcome to the Diabetes Empowerment Summit. I am your co-host and founder of the summit, as well as founder of Diabetes Dominator Coaching and Love Yourself to Health group coaching membership. I am here with an amazing woman. I'm going to just read you a very quick bio about her, and we're going to get right into her story because I know she has so much wisdom to offer us. So Monica Silveira is a psychiatrist, and her PhD is specific to mental health and diabetes. She has also been living with diabetes type 1 herself since she was 27 years old. So Monica, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat with me down in Brazil. It's very exciting to have you here. How are you?
I'm good, Danielle. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be a part of this amazing event, Diabetes Empowerment.
Oh,
I'm
great.
happy to, yeah.
Well, I'm very excited to hear what you have to say. So I would love to know, and I think a lot of people out there would be interested in knowing that, well, you told me off the air that you were already pursuing your psychiatrist kind of studies, and then you were diagnosed with diabetes kind of in the middle of that. So how did that influence your studies? How did that take you down the road to where you are now?
At the time, it didn't, not a very powerful influence in my life, because I'm just was finished my study in psychiatry, and I started to work as a psychiatrist. And the first year that I was working, I received my diagnosis. And at the time, have diabetes is not a big deal for me, because honestly, I was worried about my marriage, my career, and I really started to think about study diabetes after my pregnancies.
Oh, okay.
Yes, at the time, I realized the really suffer of managed diabetes and fear and the feeling of helplessness and the fear of lost my baby. And I didn't have at the time psychological support.
Yeah.
And people to help me to deal with my feeling. I have to do it by myself.
Right. That's
so
scary.
Yeah, it was very scary, and my husband helped me a lot. And then I started, so I need to study that to help people to do something, because there's a huge lack of knowledge and support. And I can imagine people in my situation, and that is, it's the light.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So it's like, you know, we say necessity is the mother of invention, which essentially means you needed something, which was emotional support, psychological support. You were really fearful through your pregnancies. And yet when that was happening, you couldn't find that around you. So you thought to yourself, obviously, if I need this help, there's got to be so many other people that need this help. So that was actually the kind of jumping off point for you to then really get into studying diabetes in the sense of psychology. So that's amazing. And I think that happens with a lot of us with diabetes. Like, we don't know we need something until the need hits, and then we're like, I don't know where this is, and we create it. So how did kind of, once that happened and your babies were born, and that's fantastic and amazing, how did beginning to really study the psychological effects of living with diabetes, first of all, how did it affect your care for your own diabetes? And then we'll kind of talk about how you treat patients nowadays.
In the beginning, I don't know if I didn't realize my own feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I can say I moved forward with my life, with my career, with my stuff in general. But in my pregnancy, I feel very scary. And that time I started to perceive the lack, and I put myself in a post-graduation in clinical internal medicine, not in psychiatry. I was working in type 1 diabetes care, and I started to observe patients and how endocrinologists deal with the emotional things, aspects. And I realized the huge lack, and the lack in Brazil
Yes.
So I started to research people in the United States, and I found out Bill Polonsky, Lawrence Fisher, Marta Funel, and many other people who spend their lives studying the emotional issues related to diabetes. And I started to chat with some of them and talk about my plans. I would like to start the study. And I planned my part of my PhD in the United States. And I help, I developed the type 1 diabetes stress scale for Brazilian people, Brazilian version with Larry Fisher.
Wow.
So I start in Brazil this kind of approach. And we did a workshop. I invite people from all the states of Brazil. We started to talk about and study. And at the time, we have psychologists, you have a nurse who study emotional aspects related to diabetes and the educational aspect related to diabetes. And this was a very start. We start from scratch in Brazil. Yes.
And they're lucky to have you there, though. And so when you brought, so actually Bill Polonsky is also going to be interviewed on this summit as well, which I'm very grateful for, because he is, I kind of call him, he's like the father, father of all of that kind of here in the United States, and definitely influenced me as well on my own journey on teaching about the mental and emotional aspects. And so when you brought that back, how did you, you created a workshop and all of that, but I guess really what I want to know, and probably people out there, let's just say, because the talk that you're giving, we talked about is, diabetes distress, diabetes burnout, things that are the mental and emotional kind of aspects of it. So if somebody is in that state, what are the tools that you teach them to, because I always say about burnout, this is my own opinion, is it's not about never experiencing it, because that's a hard goal. It's kind of about experiencing it less often and for less periods of time when you do experience it. That's what I try to teach about it. And I'm interested in what do you teach about it, and how do you teach your patients to kind of overcome that or work through that?
Yes, it's very common. I receive patients that some endocrinologists send it to me under the label of depression. They are depressive. Many of them have depression. Many of them didn't have. It's only the emotional conflicts and only psychological suffering about to manage diabetes. That is what was very important for me to differentiate, because patients don't see me, I have burnout.
Right.
They come with me, I don't know what to do, my A1C is high, no matter what I supposed to do, my diabetes not change. And I think I help them to understand what is diabetes distress, not to label, but this is not depression. This is only frustration about don't have a good glycemic control. This is only fear. This is only not no one accepts diabetes easily. Some people didn't accept easily diabetes. It's a kind of time to walk with patients, hear them, talk to them, for help them to understand the emotional aspect.
Yeah.
And I think this is very important, because many endocrinologists should work together, because
I agree.
Together, because it's very important to work together. For example, I can talk about my experience. When I was diagnosed, I had an expectation at the beginning that my diabetes should be perfect. And many times it not happen for everyone.
Of course.
And I asked myself at the time, what I'm doing wrong? And many times this was very hard because I feel guilty.
Yes.
And these feelings frequently put us in a not resilient
mindset. Yes.
Mindset, but in a stuck. And yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I love what you said about acceptance, because that's a really big word in my world, and everything that I teach is that's the thing you have to move into in order to begin building or cultivating a loving or compassionate relationship with your diabetes versus a relationship that feels like you're constantly fighting. Because if you don't move forward with the acceptance, it's always going to feel like a fight. And I'm not saying, I think we all know that there's no, I like the word you said, perfect, too, because I don't like the word perfect. I always try to steer people away from the word perfect because it's not really an achievable goal. And when we're working really hard to achieve a goal that we can't achieve, like you said, it creates stuckness. I love all the words that you're using because they're my favorite things to teach about, so I love hearing you talk about them. So when someone comes to you, their endocrinologist comes, and you've determined that it actually is not depression. It is a state of distress, or it is a state of burnout, as we often refer to it here in the U.S.
Yes.
What are some of the initial steps that you recommend to your patients to begin kind of getting unstuck, so to speak?
I think this field of this word perfection, for example, I can remember the patients I saw last week. And when he started when he moved to adulthood, and his mother didn't care about his diabetes, and he needs to take control, he was stuck in perfection. And he said me, I can work 9 months well, 10 months well, but 1 month is bad, will destroy all my control. This is a misconception.
Yeah.
And I try to, no, it's not truth. You can face a little time. You can have change in your life, and your glycemic control is decreased. It's not so good for 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, and you should come back to. And this is important because the patient is stuck this misconception about perfection.
Right.
And sometimes this is not possible.
No. Right. And so
we have bad days and we have good days.
So essentially you're teaching them to differentiate between reality and this perceived kind of made up situation that people think they need to get to. I need to be perfect. I need everything to A1C and all my glycemic, everything, or else I've become a failure. Or else I, like you said, guilty. I feel shameful. This happens, all the time across all types of diabetes I see. And so one of the things that I like to teach people as far as kind of unconditioning that thought, that belief system, is self-care. And I don't know if self-care is as, big of a thing or thought about in Brazil or what you teach, but I teach about kind of building up your own trust in yourself. That's what I think self-care leads to, is showing up for yourself, doing little practices that are just a demonstration that you care for your well-being, that you value your well-being. And when you do that on a regular basis, it kind of builds up this resiliency, like you said. It builds up this feeling of confidence, like, oh, okay, I know I'm going to have bad days, and I know I'm going to have good days, and that's okay, but I'm going to continue to show up. And, just for example, things like meditation or journaling or all kinds of, do you recommend practices like that in your kind of psychiatrist practice?
Yes, I recommend exercise, meditation, psychotherapy. education, just solve problems, just a couple sections of solve problems to deal with mistakes, misconceptions. For example, this patient, I said, it was stuck, and that misconception, it's a barrier because he started to think about, I don't need more check my carbs because all the time you high. I don't need to check my sensor CGM. It's not CGM, in Brazil it's more common Libre, but many conceptions put patients to give up.
Yeah.
And not to face, I have a bad moment and I need to move forward. It's
right.
only a bad number in this moment, not tomorrow, not the next month, not next year. I should to realize the importance of things. Yeah. One bad result is not determine all the life.
Yeah, that is a beautiful statement and quote. I almost want to put that on a meme and put it on the internet. One number that is not what you want it to be does not determine your value as a person. It doesn't determine whether you're good or bad at managing diabetes. It just means that you have diabetes and you're human. That's it. That's all that means. So you teach people to kind of differentiate between each instance and not get so involved mentally and emotionally in each number. So much more kind of like taking a step back and seeing it from a little bit further away, if I'm understanding. Is that more? Yeah. Okay. No, that's.
I think, Daniela, it's very important because when someone have a bad moment in all aspects of life, it's common we feel helplessness for a moment.
Right.
But for a moment don't mean for the all life in other situations. You need to keep our strongness.
Yes.
And this is resilience. I teach about of resilience and empowerment because diabetes is a part of our life. We have many things happening in our life.
Yeah.
And this keep to be together. It's not possible put in different mindset.
Right.
This happen together. It's the real life.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And if you don't mind sharing, if it's okay, what are some of your personal, do you like exercising and meditation? Do you engage in those regularly, or kind of what are Monica's favorite, self-care, resiliency building practices?
Exercise. Yeah. Because it's a time of the day I turn off my cell phone. I talk to my kids. I'm out. I talk to my patients. I'm out for 1 hour.
Yep.
This is a time for me. And I think better when I walk.
Of course.
When I'm running. Mm-hmm. And many insights I had in my life when I were running.
Yeah, I agree.
And this is the perfect moment to start my day because if my glycemia is good in the morning, it's easy to manage my glycemic during the day.
Right.
And this is better for me. I feel more comfortable. I feel my mood better. I feel more without symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah.
This help have the other side of my life. If I feel sick, all the other aspects of my life is hard.
Yeah.
If I feel comfortable, without dizzy, without
tired,
sweating, excess of sleep, my life is better.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I keep this feeling for me. Take care of my diabetes, allow me to live better. That is why I manage my diabetes, because I want to live better. I want to work, I want to travel, I want to take care, I want to go to the movie, to the park.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and so essentially what you're saying, and this is kind of how I interpret it, is that I take care of my diabetes for the same reasons, but I kind of see it as like, it's part of me. It's a relationship that I have with this part of myself. So if I'm neglecting any relationship, right, whether it's with a person or with myself, it's suffering is going to expand outwards, right? But if I care for that part, all of a sudden, all of the other parts, like you said, if your diabetes is well taken care of, most of the time, it spills outward into your career, into your relationships with your family, into your interactions with other people. And that's why I think self-love and self-care is, for me, that the foundation of it, because if you're not able or at a point yet in your life where you really do value, I speak from my own experience where I did not value myself for about 15 of my 30 years with diabetes, and I suffered a lot. And I realized that the suffering was caused by the thought, or it was a belief, but it wasn't true, that I was not worthy of all of that care, that I was a burden. I was burdening myself. I was burdening my mom. I was burdening people in my life by having this disease. Nobody ever told me that. No one ever said to me, oh, you're a burden. No one ever treated me poorly, but I personally kind of internalized that. Do you see that a lot, like where people feel like a burden? Is that a big kind of, because around here, that's a big pervasive thought or belief in a lot of people with diabetes heads. Is that happening in your practice as well, where people just feel like they don't deserve the effort because it's too much? And if they do, kind of, how do you help them with that?
Yes, I see this in my practice all the time. And I think, for example, when a teenager has a lot of problems, it's impossible don't have familial conflict. Yeah. And the patients needed to face another problem, the diabetes and the conflict with family.
Right.
And of course, diabetes is hard.
Yes.
Of course, when I wake up, I need to think first, what is my number? What I will eat? I know other people don't need to think, but right. After some time, this is all a part of me. I don't know how to wake up without
thinking.
Yeah. And this not burdening me a lot at this moment.
Same.
Because this is a part.
Right.
And it's very hard for me. Don't do that, because I will feel worse. I will feel dizzy. And sometimes this is, I think, is very important, because many people talk about how hard it is to manage diabetes. Of course it's hard. It's hard to learn how to manage diabetes. It's not, I think type 1 people need to be as a specialist, as an endocrinologist.
Yes,
it's
right.
Not
we are our own specialists. Yes.
Yes. It takes time. It takes time, a lot of time.
Yes.
And this process is hard, with frustration, with guilt, with failures, with anger. But when we understand and realize this stuff, I think it's easy to move forward.
I agree. And I love that you say this, and kind of both of us, I'm grateful that both of us can come from a place of kind of having been on the other side and are now here, because where I also personally, now 30 years into my diagnosis, I don't feel anywhere near as burdened. I don't feel anywhere near as stressed out about diabetes. In fact, I acknowledge that I have privilege of accessing my insulin and accessing technology, and that's very helpful. But I also acknowledge that I've done a lot of hard work, like you said, on myself. A lot of hard work on processing my own diagnosis and coming to acceptance. But one thing I also wanted to ask you, just come up while you were talking about, I was thinking about it. One thing that I needed to do, I was diagnosed as a child, and I didn't really know much about grief. And I didn't go through well, I'm sure I went through a grieving process, but I was not aware of it. And so now, as an adult, I went through it. I specifically went through a grieving process for myself to process the loss of, the childhood or the life that I had prior to diabetes. Do you talk about kind of grieving the diagnosis? Because I personally think, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but I have a lot of training in this field, and I feel like acknowledging that we must go through a specific grieving process for our diagnosis is key to us moving forward. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yes, I think this is very important. And many people don't understand the normal process of all the grieving. You need to, we feel sadness, anger, and we only overcome when you face these feelings.
Yeah.
And I think the professional should help, support. Yeah. It's normal people feel months or years. It's very common in teenager, especially when people is diagnosed in the teenager time.
Yeah, that's when I had my biggest problems. I was diagnosed at 8, but I didn't really start having the real problems until about 13. Once 13 hit, it was like, whoosh, just, it went crazy. So I agree with you. And so where does someone start with that process in your own, just to kind of acknowledge that they did lose something, and it's okay to, a lot of times they probably come to you, this is a guess, but they might be in that like denial phase, because I was in that phase for far too long in my own opinion. But how do you move, through that? How do you face that? And how do you teach people to face that reality?
I think I need to talk, listen, and normalize this feeling. People don't be able to start to check their blood sugar before to understand the grieving and to overcome. Because there's this, it's a fight.
Yeah.
Inside. It's not a cognitive process.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I like to talk about that too here. A lot of people want a word is pragmatic here, kind of just like they want a step-by-step, like I can just read this book and do these steps and then everything's just going to be okay. And I laugh not because it's funny, but because I know that that's not how it works. But I also know that it's completely possible to move through that process if you're willing to not be perfect. I think it goes right back to what we said before. Grieving is not perfect. It's not linear. It's not like you can just list the steps in like anger, denial, grief, sadness, and then they're just going to run through them like this, like perfect. It's not like that. And I love that you bring that up. You have to listen, but the word you said that I think is so meaningful is normalize it. Normalize it. We all go through this, and not just us with diabetes. Anyone who gets a diagnosis of any disease must go through a grieving process to move into that acceptance phase. And so, like, I actually have chills a little bit talking to you about it, because it's just it's so important to this, to getting to a place where you can feel empowered, right? You can feel resilient. So I really appreciate, and I'm sure your patients are just love you and love that you, not that anyone wants you to have diabetes, but the fact that you do you find that being a psychiatrist that lives with type 1 diabetes helps your patients listen to you and your advice more attentively? Do you find that?
Yes, because I have some skills that I learned. For example, don't push patients, don't pressure them, accept the time of my patients. I don't demand things that I see they are not prepared to. I need to train myself to be patient, to have patience with the process of my patients.
Yeah.
And I think people who study psychology or psychiatry have more support than other professionals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's very hard for medical students. It's a common misconception that we will be able to cure or to help everyone.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes, and it's hard for medical students to face the impotence.
Yeah, just the feeling like they can't do it. They can't help everyone.
and accept. Maybe I can make a little thing, a little process.
Yeah.
Maybe the next month, a little process.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe next month, and this is important.
Yeah.
Understand the time of the patients. Don't put a lot of pressure, because the feeling will be failure, because it's hard to understand, to keep glycemic control of the target in the first month, in the first years. It's a crazy start. When I started to run with diabetes, because when I was diagnosed, I used to run street runnings, half marathon. Was crazy. It started because at the time it was NPH insulin.
I know. Yes.
And I feel very stressed to understand my numbers.
Yeah.
Because all the time I was hypo. I had hypo at the night, because everything was right in the morning, but in the night, no.
Right.
And this took me time to understand, to decrease my doses, to manage with my dietitian. I have a dietitian who was marathonist and understand type 1 diabetes. That was amazing in my life. Yeah. This woman helped me a lot. I understand my adjustments.
Yeah. Yeah.
This changed my life, in fact.
I believe it. And I bet, and that's kind of what I meant when I said about your patients now, knowing that you have type 1 and that you understand the nuances of living with diabetes. Just the fact that they know, and I can just speak to myself, from my own experience. When for me, I used to be, let's just use an example of, I used to lift weights, and I used to be like into heavy weightlifting. I hired an athletic coach who had type 1 diabetes. I sought him out. I looked for him specifically because I knew that I did not want to work with anyone on changing my mind or my body when they didn't fully understand all of what went into that. So I know, I'm grateful you found your dietitian, that it was a marathon person, and I know that you're helping so many, maybe you don't even realize, just by having diabetes and just being so patient, being so accepting. I'm just grateful for doctors like you. This is kind of my way of, because certainly in the United States, there's a lot of instances of just kind of get in, get out, be really quick about seeing the patient, and nobody's asking the patient, how are you feeling? Not, why are you not complying to this medical regimen? What's wrong with you? Why are you, I don't say never, but it's often, it's not, how are you feeling? And I am grateful for doctors like you who are asking those questions, because I'm sure you're helping so many people with that attitude that you have, and it's beautiful. So one other question that I have, and this is kind of like something I'm asking many people on the summit, is what is one thing that you wish you knew immediately upon your diagnosis that you know now that may have helped you a little bit as you were progressing in your own care?
I think my first endocrinologist did a good job with me and tell me that I could be a normal life.
Good.
He gave me hope, and this was very important. I didn't see my diagnosis like a death sentence of complications. I keep my hope all the time. It was very important. But I think if someone could tell me at the beginning, you don't should be perfect.
Yes. Yes.
Because I was stuck in my thoughts about what I did wrong. What did I do wrong? And when another doctor tell me, you don't should think a lot what you did. For example, hypoglycemia. At the time, I was worried about hypoglycemia when I was seeing my patients. That scared me.
Sure.
Now I have all the time my stuff, my glucose, my juice. When I feel a little dizzy, I just drink my juice in front of my patients.
Yeah.
Normally.
Normalizing again. Beautiful.
Normally. And I said, I'm sorry, I need to drink my orange juice because my glycemia it's a little bit low.
Yeah.
And this is not cause any problem to my patients.
Of course not. I can tell you for sure, it makes your patients love you even more. If they're not telling you that, I promise you, that makes them love you even more. So yeah, so that advice, don't chase perfection. That could be the quote of the day, of the year, of the century for how to approach diabetes management. So thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing your opinions and the way you take care of your patients and yourself, because I just personally, I love it. I think it's perfect, not, just saying that to be funny, but it really is, because the compassion that you are exuding I can feel it. I can feel it through Zoom. And so I know that you're helping so many people. So before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you would like to share with people? I know you're in Brazil and we have people from all over the world tuning in, but just in general, anything you have coming up that you want to talk about, or any other words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think at this moment, the social media is very helpful. A good social media.
Peer support.
Yeah, peer support. I think this is very important. And I'd like to help people to get more access. That was, I want to talk with you because I think you are doing something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can reach a lot of people because many people don't have access to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, because they don't have money or insurance, or they have worry about many people
around it. I know.
And I understand that all this support could be a first step to feel not alone.
Yes.
And to understand every people have lows and downs, and it's possible to move forward. It's possible to help, to look for help with a lot of professionals. I work in a group in the United States of researchers, and they are amazing. We share a lot of information, and I think we are being able to put in easy words for people, not only in academic stuff and academic journal, but Polonsky, it's a huge example.
Yes.
To put this in easy words.
Yeah.
And I think you are putting this in easy words too.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad and I appreciate it, and I try, and yes, Bill Polonsky and you, and there's so many other of us around, not enough. I always say, if anybody's out there interested in getting into helping treat people with diabetes and the mental and if that's something you're passionate about, go for it. Go to school, get your certifications, because we need as much help out in the world with this as we can get. So thank you so much. I enjoyed this immensely. I got to know you here in front of, everybody else is getting to know you too, but it's really been a pleasure. And thank you for taking the time out of your day, and thank you for helping people with diabetes the way that you do. Genuinely, it means more than you probably give yourself credit for, I would guess. So thank you. And
thank you.
Yeah, for everyone else out there. Yeah,
thank you so much for this opportunity. I wish you a success in this event. I'm available for anything you need me, and thank you for this time. I like to hear you too.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did, and stay tuned for more interviews, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care.